Hello, athletes and fans of bodybuilding. Tarek Gindi with the Mr. Olympia. Today, we have received news and unfortunately confirmation that a great bodybuilder has passed away, Gustavo Badell. I have my co-hosts right here with me, the great Flex Wheeler, four-time Arnold Classic champion, 1992 Mr. USA's, and I have my co-host from Primetime Muscle, Chris Cormier, four-time Ironman champion, 1993 Mr. USA's. Flex, Gustavo Badell, he placed third at the Mr. Olympia. He was the hope for a lot of the Latin community. You knew him. Talk to us a little bit about what you knew about Gustavo Badell as a person and as a bodybuilder.
Yeah, back when I was working with for muscle development, I had to do a lot of commentating on him. And actually, I flew to Brazil and met with him and his family, his daughter at the time, and covered a story for him. But man, I'm speechless. I don't know what to say. I know I seen him again. Me and Bob seen him again, probably about 7 or 8 years ago, and he was really unrecognizable. I didn't even know who he was, even when he sat down at the table and he was like, "You guys don't recognize me?" I was like, "No." And when he said his name, it was like, but I didn't know he was sick. All of us look a lot different now. I look a lot different now. I just thought that he had, slimmed down, because there's absolutely no reason to carry that type of size when you're not making money off of it. You get older, but I absolutely had no idea. Chris, you said you knew that that he was sick. I had no idea that he was sick.
Yeah, I just had I heard some kidney issues from the past, but I didn't know to what degree. Gustavo, I mean, I met him, in the mid '90s, and before he even made his, made his presence felt on the Olympia stage. We were friends before that, and yeah, man, it's really sad news to hear. I was really shocked when I first. That was like the last person I was thinking. Being born 1972, that leaves him 50 years old now. That's. I mean, I know a lot of us bodybuilders, when we went into the sport, we knew it wasn't, the safest way to go about living, but we had a passion, we had a goal set, and unfortunately, a lot of these things happen. It's just hard to even fathom, like, dealing with it. When those days come. I know we always have that. We all have that date set for each other, but it's
still shocking when we hear it.
Yeah.
Well, we're joined here by 2000 Mr. USA's, the voice of bodybuilding, Bob Cicherillo. Bob, Gustavo Badell passes away, 50 years old. He placed third at the Mr. Olympia. You knew him. You saw him on stage. Can you just remember him for us?
Well, I'll tell you this. Gustavo made huge improvements in a very short time, and the physique he presented, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the year he took third, he was originally like in 8th place. And to this day, he is a guy that stands out in my mind of coming all the way from 8th to 3rd within the confines of the prejudging rounds. And he just seemed to get better and better and better. But his initial call out, he was looking at like 7th or 8th place. And when the smoke cleared, he ends up in the top 3. To this date, I've never seen anybody climb the ladder that high. That's very, very difficult to do. But every time he posed, he got sharper. But you can see by this footage that we're looking at on the Olympia stage, I mean, it was very well put together. He had all the attributes of a champion and did very well relatively in a short career, unfortunately. But, me and Flex were just talking earlier when this news broke that we ran into Gustavo just a few years ago, and he had turned trainer. He was training other athletes, but holy crap, we didn't even recognize him. He was lean. He was probably about, 170 pounds, but he was in shape. But he had a full beard, and he came up and kind of basically had to introduce himself. And we kind of looked at each other like, oh, my God, it's Gustavo, wow. But we hadn't seen him in years at that point. But he kind of reinvented himself as a coach. But this is, if true, I mean, I don't know if this is 100% confirmed. Hopefully this is, some misinformation, but we're hoping against hope. But if it is, rest in peace, my friend.
Hey, Chris, It's hard to I was just telling Bob and Flex, I I I, I think I met Gustavo one time at Gold's Gym Flamingo, maybe 15 years ago, and he was a prominent competitor at the Mr. Olympia. But I didn't know his personality. I didn't know him well, but he was extremely nice.
Yeah,
Talk,
super
talk
nice.
to me about who he was as a person.
Well, like when I met him in back in 94, 95, I was I had a hell of a way to get to Italy. I was going there to myself. I was with the Weeder group at the time. Amy Fadley was there. Also, she was uh, going to perform there with me, and lost all my stuff. Tried to get some money out the damn machine. Machine took my credit card. I had no clothes. I had nothing. I didn't have any money at all. I just had my passport, and then I got a ride. I just asked this one guy who was actually on the same flight as me, just give me a ride wherever you're going, and I'll just make it from there. And I just saw this hotel, and I just said, "Hey, stop right here," because I saw a poster on the hotel front about the expo I was going to there in Rimini, Italy. So I get out with my passport in hand. That's all I got. I just gave it to the front desk. I said, "This is all I got. I can promise to pay you in the morning." I went upstairs, wait till the morning time to come. I came down to get some breakfast, and he was sitting there at the by himself at the breakfast table, and I didn't know if he's I never met him before, so I didn't know. Looking at him, you don't know if he speaks English, you don't know if he's Italian, you don't know where he's from. And I said, "Hey, do you speak English?" And he looked at me like, "Yes, I speak English," like that. And I was like, it's just like almost heaven sent just to hear someone that speaks English and can understand me. But I sat down with him and we started talking. I told him about all the situation that happened to me, and he said, "Yeah, man, I got you, brother. I'll help you find out where you got to go." And we hung together that whole week. That whole week I was there, we was together the whole time there in Italy. And everywhere I went, he was there with me, and we got to know each other really well. That week, became friends, and I kept rooting for him as he started climbing the ranks. But at the time, he wasn't at that level. I don't even know if he was pro yet or not, but he, at the end of the 90s, he started to get better and better, and then into the early 2000s. So it was just a testament of who he is as a man. Like we didn't know each other, but we became fast friends in a hurry, just from a simple hello.
Jeez, how time can change in just 17 years.
Flex, when you were working with muscular development, you had to do a lot of coverage of that era. Jay Cutler, Dennis James, and Ronnie Coleman was finishing his career. Did you get a chance to meet Gustavo, to interview him? What was your impression of him as a person?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I had to do a personal profile on him, where I flew back to his hometown, met him at his house, his wife at the time, his daughter at the time. He was a great guy. He was really funny. He had a great sense of humor. He was just a great guy. I have nothing bad to say about him at all. He was just a great guy. He's a great competitor. He's very confident. It's still just kind of hard to accept right now, especially, like I said, off air. I deal with kidney problems, and I have been for over 20 something years, and still is. And to hear someone pass away from that, is difficult.
Hey, Bob, 50 years old, Gustavo Badell. The key question is, you know a lot of these guys. When you were talking to him, when you met him, did you talk to him about some issues that he was having, or not really? That never came to the conversation?
No, I mean, and this was some years ago now. So I'd like to think. I mean, when me and Flex ran into him, I mean, he was lean and mean. I mean, this is a guy who wasn't using hard, or if anything, I mean, he was lean, he was in shape. Seemed to be in good health. So if he had issues, and again, we don't know his personal history, his family's history, anything else that could be related. I mean, listen, there's a thousand things, but what I most remember about Gustavo was on stage, and I don't know what year this is that we're looking at. It might be the year he took third or so, but for any bodybuilding historians out there, when you watch the footage, when Jay Cutler finally beats Ronnie for the first time, it's Gustavo that's the first guy over to Jay and to jump on him and gave him a big hug. You know, he finally took down the champ and all that. But Gustavo was loved by all the competitors, even though he was a very good and feisty competitor. He wanted to win like anybody else. Listen, he was a fan of bodybuilding at the end of the day. He was as happy for Jay Cutler winning as Jay Cutler was to win. So, but I'll always have that in my head that it was Gustavo. For you guys, you want to get on YouTube this week and look that up. You'll see Gustavo, and he's right there.
Well, you know, that's actually funny, because one time I interviewed Jay Cutler, and I said, Jay, you didn't seem to be that, excited about beating Ronnie Coleman. And you're right. The first person, and he was more excited than Jay, was Gustavo Badell.
Yeah.
And Gustavo Badell, for most people that don't know, there was that challenge where bodybuilders challenged each other on certain poses. And on that challenge, Gustavo Badell made history and actually beat Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler, and all those guys, right?
Yeah,
that was the much lauded challenge round, which I was never a big fan of for various reasons. And this was great for Gustavo. Listen, if I remember, it was like 25 grand in his pocket, so that was a nice thing. But at the end of the day, I felt good for Gustavo, but I just thought it was weird that a guy could win a challenge round, which is literally based on the mandatory poses, but lose the actual competition, and which is why I wasn't in favor of it at the time. And thank God we ended up. It only lasted 2 years when we got rid of it. But that does show you how good Gustavo was, because he could go toe to toe with anybody in the world at that point.
Yes, he had some fantastic body parts. His those arms are just nuts, and just the way he would pose them and present his physique, he could really stand toe to toe with a lot of guys.
Seeing the footage here of Big Marcus Rule, big German giant. Here's Gustavo, but Gustavo's strength was that he was very equally proportioned. I mean, if you look at this footage right here that we're looking at, he's not missing anything. Like he's so complete. That was the hallmark of his physique, and later in his career, in his peak, I tell you what, he was as good as anybody. You could be third in the Olympia, you can be first. He was that good.
For sure, man.
I remember this. You guys, you remember watching this challenge round with there's Triple H on stage?
Yeah, I remember. That was crazy.
and why, Bob? With Ronnie Coleman there, with Jay Cutler there, how come Gustavo Badell won this round? What did he do to win the challenge round with bodybuilders that are proven to be superior? Did he have a better strategy?
No, the problem really, and this is again why I was not in favor of these shenanigans, because it was basically a mathematical contest, and so he happened to hit the right poses against the right guys, and mathematically he ended up in first place. And again, the weird thing is like, well, nobody had him winning the Olympia, so that's why I never liked it. I don't like the funky things. There's other things we could do on stage. I don't want to get into a whole thing about that, but you can see why this wasn't a good idea, because it didn't really reflect the true, one physique against the other. I mean, listen, that's why we got a prejudging. And,
wasn't it Bob the previous Mr. Olympias that were judging that threw everything off too?
Yeah, that might have been that year where this was not a panel by PB judges. It was actually a panel of celebrity judges, and they saw things completely different. But again, they're not looking at it the same. These aren't trained judges. Listen, just because you're a great bodybuilder doesn't mean you know how to judge a physique. I mean, we all know plenty of people who were great bodybuilders who can't call a show to save their lives. So
they're asking for different body parts. What body part do you want to challenge him on? So I guess he went
But
with
the whole thing never made sense to me because it's like, well, you guys just competed in the prejudging. So the guy who was fifth lost most of the poses against everybody else. In that case, I think it was Gunther, and then reverse. So it's like, well, why would a guy all of a sudden beat you in the same pose, 20 minutes later? It made no sense.
I do remember here's Gustavo Badell against Jay Cutler, but I do remember Gustavo Badell competing against Phil Heath at the Ironman, and Phil Heath won that show. Gustavo Badell was in second, and Phil looked very good. But when Gustavo Badell posed, and I even remember this. Look at, nice back double biceps, great detail. But when Gustavo Badell posed, he made sounds, right? Remember?
Yeah.
He always made sounds. And the crowd, especially the Latin crowd, a lot of the Latinos there, they went crazy when he was vocal and making these sounds. And there was one time, look at him calling here Ronnie Coleman. There was one time that Big Steve actually made the sound back to him on the mic, right?
Yeah. Listen, you don't want to be taking on Ronnie in any pose. I mean, that's for sure.
Well, if you're gonna go against Ronnie, he did have a good strategy, and he called abdominals and thighs.
And he still lost it. So, how do you lose? Come on, it's Ronnie's weakest pose, for God's sakes. I mean.
And it's not really. I mean, obviously we don't want to get off the topic of the passing away Gustavo, but talking about just some of the fun parts of it. It wasn't that Ronnie had a weak stomach. He just had a 4-pack, and a majority of us had a 6 or a 7, and some of us had an 8-pack. So I tried to make fun of him by counting mine, but it didn't do crap. He still won anyway. So it wasn't that he had a weak body part. His abs, he just had 4 instead of the traditional 7, 8, or 6. Yeah.
Here's a fun story for you guys. So at the press conference that year, remember all the guys were going back and forth. And we were having some fun and all that. And that's when Ronnie made that infamous comment that if Gustavo thought he was going to beat him, he must be smoking crack, right?
Oh, I thought that was with Jay. I thought it was Jay.
No. That was Ronnie and Gustavo. And the funny part was, well, I mean, Ronnie said that a few times about everybody, but that was kind of Ronnie to that Ronnie, that was funny. Well, because Gustavo's English was limited, he actually got mad later on because he couldn't figure out why Ronnie Coleman was saying that he takes drugs. And he was insinuating like he was on crack, and because his family was there, and he didn't get the humor because of his English was not great. So it's like he didn't understand Ronnie was just kind of joking around, that he didn't actually mean he was on crack. But Gustavo took it as Ronnie was telling everybody he was on drugs. So
which he was.
Yeah, well, probably not crack.
We have here Xavier from Desktop Bodybuilding. Ronnie said Jay must be smoking crack. Maybe Ronnie said it twice. So his nickname was the freaking Rican. He was from Puerto Rico, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And
actually, if I remember, he's not Puerto Rican.
Venezuela, right?
He's Venezuelan, I believe, but he identified. He's kind of like it's like the Dennis Wolf thing, where he's actually Russian, but he identified himself as German, and he was, as far as anybody's concerned. A lot of people don't know that Dennis is actually of Russian origin. But Gustavo, as far as he was concerned, he was Puerto Rican, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
he's a good guy. Good guy.
We take this opportunity to honor a great bodybuilder. He placed 3rd at the Mr. Olympia. When we had this challenge at the Mr. Olympia, he actually won. I met him one time at Gold's Gym Flamingo, and I had the opportunity to speak with him maybe for about 40 seconds and shake his hand. And he was extremely, extremely friendly, very nice. For some of those guys like Chris Cormier, Flex Wheeler, and Bob Ciccarello that had the opportunity to meet this great bodybuilder and this great man, they share their stories, and they tell us that he was not only a great bodybuilder, but he was also a great guy. We want to, condolences to the family. We want to take this moment to remember Gustavo Badell. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tarek El-Guindy with the Mr. Olympia. I want to thank you, my co-host, Chris Cormier, Flex Wheeler, and Bob Ciccarillo. We'll be back next Wednesday with Olympia TV.
Ladies and gentlemen,